Evening all. Welcome back to Relove Guitars for excuse me, an ESP LTD Explorer setup. This is Adam's, first of Adam's two Explorer type guitars. The other one's a white James Hetfield ESP, which we'll get onto later in the week. And this one is a big chunky thing, as they all are. But as you can see, it's a bolt-on neck, hockey stick headstock, a few little dings and a few little ancient touches up. One thing I noticed about this neck is it's out of alignment, but it's also loose, so that's probably why. Here, this is a quick look in here. We've got a jack socket which is loose that I need to take care of, so we'll do that in a minute. You can see the dings around in places. So yeah, so this is in for a full setup. Even as I lift it up, I can hear the neck creak, which is a bit funny. So it's got some cracking here, which I've got some new rings to go, flat bottom rings. So Freddie Mercury, the X200 on there. It's currently got a plastic nut, which is actually a bit short for it, but we're going to replace it with a Tusk nut. And I've got this one here, which is similar style, round backed, or we've got this one here which is a flat backed, both the same string spacing, so we shall see. We've got a switch that doesn't quite know whether it's up or down. In fact, it doesn't, because it's diagonal, so we probably need to put that one way or the other. I think it should go up and down, so we'll just reorient that. I've got a loose strap button on here as well, so I'm just going to make a note of that. Jack socket and strap button, possibly both. Yeah, both of them are loose. Sometimes they can just be done up, other times they require packing out with a piece of timber, a piece of dowel, and re-drilling a pilot hole so it goes into fresh metal. The fresh metal, the frets are quite low, but they're not worn out, and there's a very small amount of, only a very small amount of wear on them, but we'll probably take care of that. There's a bit of a repair there on the edge somewhere in the past. Yeah, so Duncan designed pickups on this, so I guess this is a favourite of Adam's, and I think he must like the sound of them. I don't really know what they add up to. What I can see here is this bridge looks like it's struggling to intonate in that direction. So both the high E, the B, the D and the A are pushed up against the wall here. So I wouldn't be surprised when we've got new strings on to find out that that's difficult to intonate. So the first thing I had in mind was, I said to myself, pickup rings, but that doesn't make any sense, because does it? I've got to take off the what's-its. We should do the setup part first, so that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to reorder this while I'm here. So pickup rings will come there. So the first thing we're going to do is, let's do jack socket and setup strap buttons. Let's do the Tusk nut after that. Let's do the setup after that, and fret leveling. Let's do the let's do let's do the recrown. Then we'll do the pickup rings, and then we'll do clean, oil the board, restring. 7 will be stretching out and aligning the neck, stretching out new strings. With this, there is on both of these. Let me show you its specifications. Here and here. This is not the best angle to look at it from, so let's let's try and see it from here, for which I will need the magic. That's it, the magic of the mirror. For close-up angles that somebody criticised me for on YouTube today. Wow, stupid camera angles. There you go, look, here's a stupid camera angle. So you can see here, this one, this one and this one are rammed up against the front edge of the bridge, which suggests it's difficult, they need to be further forward than they are. If that is the case, both of these can be turned around to provide a small amount more intonation room going in this direction. So we might need to do that once the strings are off and that part of everything's done. There you go. How's about that for a stupid camera angle? Zooming back out for a less than stupid one, let's do the jack socket first of all. And I don't think it's a very good angle for this, but these guitars are, without a shadow of a doubt, actually quite funkily difficult to reach, obviously, or to work with. Now this is cracked, the plastic on this, and it's a flattish one. So now what I'm also looking at while I'm doing this is the screws are all pretty much worn out, so I'm thinking about possibly replacing the screws as I go, because they're sort of worn, as in worn out, they're worn down. They used to be black, but they've been worn, well, some of them were black, but they've been worn to a chromy looking bare metal finish. I think it's more likely to just become bare metal. So we could upgrade them to bigger ones now. Ooh, what was that? Flurf. Just looking at this here, it doesn't look, well, it doesn't look too bad, but it's loose and moving. Let's do a quality replacement. There's no reason why not to, and let us see if, while I'm at it, we can use a square plate. There's a metal plate, and actually it doesn't bend either, but then it probably technically doesn't need to. That's okay, we can use that. Here you go, quality metal plate. Now let's go for a quality switchcraft thingy. There we go. Look, let's make it work better while we're at it, and we'll put some new black thingamajigs in, the screw things. So right from the outset, I'm going to need to fire up the soldering iron and be ready with a bit of solder. Yeah, so one of the funny comments that somebody made was not only how boring or whatever my comments were, but you know, how not only how bad my camera angles were, but how boring my comments are, or something like that. So, there you go. What a terrible waste of space I am. It always amazes me that people come on somebody's YouTube channel and make a comment like that. And you sort of think to yourself, wow, that must have felt good for a split second to know better, to be better than someone else. Oh, I'm better than... Oh, he also complained that... what did he complain? He complained that I wasn't keeping the top of an acoustic guitar well enough. I think the criticism came from the fact that in his mind the guitar that I was setting up and had several in a row that were rubbish quality in that particular brand. I think that annoyed him, seemed to have bugged him, and he needed to tell me that his... What's this? I was switched right off. He needed to tell me that his worked perfectly and had no such problems. Well, that's cool, you know, and that's why they're not in a guitar fixer's shop, maybe. Anyway, but obviously in the case of mine, the ones I had in front of me were there because they are there because they don't play properly and they need working on. Anyway, so that was the first thing, and then the next thing was what nonsense I was talking, and then how I wasn't treating the guitar properly and so forth. And it's funny, in this old world of conflict that we do live in, the sort of, what do they call it, the reptilian part of the brain wants to kind of fight back. and I've learned to resist that, because it's never, whatever you say or do, or however right you are, it doesn't really matter. It's just not a productive response. And I find it much better to recognize, or to recognize that when people do that, they are scoring points in a world where they don't actually feel that good, so far, in so much that being right about something like that is a sort of momentary feel good. And of course nobody thinks of it like that. They just it's a way of being, and it's a way, sort of familiar way of being that we resort to. And I know that because I've done it tons in my past, and probably sometimes still have to stop myself doing it, because I'm aware enough at least to recognise the impulse, which is to be the clever one or the smart one, or be the only one that knows the answer or the situation or whatever. So it's a pretty sad thing. So when I get those comments, I immediately sort of get vexed by them, and then I tend to sort of let them go and try to empathise with how easy it is to attempt to score points that way, or to feel better about yourself. It's the truth of, the biggest truth of all is that I would hate to be like that in my life. I'd hate that to be the only way I could feel good about myself and what I was doing. And I think the way past it is to recognise and be honest, and open up to yourself about how much you did or didn't do it in your own world, because I certainly did. I used to quite regularly spot people who's done something, said something wrong, or whose assessment of a situation was wrong, and I would feel kind of pretty cool that I'd got it right and they'd got it wrong. It's not very enlightened. Anyhow, it is not something I have to do anymore, or it's not something I do anymore. I stop myself sometimes from doing it. So, and it's true. The thing that I thought about afterwards is, God, I am bored with talking sometimes about stuff. And no, I don't think what I've got to say is terribly interesting and all the rest of that stuff. But you know what? I'm still setting up people's guitars, and I still want to talk through what I'm doing. And so sometimes, like real life, it's going to be incredibly boring, because real life isn't interesting all the time, and I'm certainly not in the least bit interesting most of the time. Can you see me? Yes, you can. So it's a tricky one. I think sometimes that critics can mistake, and often do with content like this. It's easy to judge it by your own standards or your own expectations more than anything. And I've said many times before, when people criticise, I often invite people. So it's always too late, because it's always after someone's been critical. But when people, as a general rule, I invite people to consider that if I've chosen to do it a certain way, there's a reason for it. And maybe, instead of just assuming they're right in their criticism, and that I'm obviously wrong because it disagrees with what they would do, it would be enlightened and probably a bit smart to imagine that I've chosen to do it for a certain way, and actually it's probably smarter to imagine that if I keep on doing it, it's probably less because I'm just stupid and don't know any different. It could actually be because it works. So that's what I would encourage people to do, to consider that. Okay, now this is a slightly different sized thing, so we're going to get one of these to fit, and then the rest are going to need new holes, but that's fine. So we'll have some new, we'll base it off one of these, and we'll get some new holes. So a little thing like this takes a little while to get sorted. There we are, delicious. Switchcraft jack, gorgeous, lovely quality, replacing the old one which had a reported intermittent problem. So rather than, even if I were to try and recreate the problem and I couldn't do it for myself, you know, my customers said they have an intermittent problem, so what I'll do is take their word for it. And plus the fact that I can see it moving a little bit, which a jack doesn't really want to do. So that's good enough for me to make it sensible to redo it. I had also a discussion the other day about using power tools in this situation, and again, some people went off on the old, well, I never do, and you know, always do it by hand. Well, yes, you can, but the danger is if you attack it with too much force, when it's, where did that go? When it's standing up like these are, it's very easy for it to kind of flip over, and you find yourself hitting the thing. So what I do is treat it with gentleness until it's got has bitten, and then put some more force into it when it's closer in. There we go. Metal plate, looks the same, 10 times stronger. No more breaks in the plastic, because that's just going to go in the bin. I never reuse unsubstandard jack sockets. I mean, it's not like a piece that has to be kept because it's so original. I'm also going to throw away these scratch plate screws because they're worn as well. Okay, next thing to do while we're here at the beginning of this is to check the doofers. These things. It's actually very difficult to get to where I need to get. So I just want to check whether this will do up. Let's get it up on its hind legs. Yeah, that's okay. Sometimes they are just loose, sometimes they need overfilling and repacking. This one, no. Actually, that's quite good too. Next time they come loose, they probably would benefit from being thingamied. Now, while I'm here and I've got strings on, it also makes sense to waggle this until it's in place. So let's just have a quick look. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I probably can't because I can't do this and press it down on the ground. Maybe I can. Right, here it is. If I lean on this, keep it in one place, and you can see it moves quite a lot. So I really want it somewhere like there, which to me feels like it needs a shim to hold it in the right place. You can hold a neck where it needs to be simply by screwing the screws in really tight, but sometimes you might want to consider a little shim in the side just to help it stay out. And some people some factories or on production lines, you'll find guitars that have little bits of both, what do they tend to use? Sometimes paper and sometimes little bits of sandpaper, or sanding belt actually is usually the stuff because it's quite thick. And they'll use that as a sort of shim to lift the neck up a little bit sometimes, and other times to help keep the neck away. So I can make a very small 0.25 millimeter brass shim, and what I'm going to look and see is if it actually goes in here all together. So I'm kind of trying to prise it open a little bit. Okay, just maybe fractionally too thick. I'm trying to think of what else I've got other than bits of sandpaper and stuff like that. Let me just do something. This could be a little bit difficult because it's got bits sticking up, so let me just smooth this out. In somewhere I've probably got some tin which is actually thinner again than this, and also makes a pretty good side or lifting shim. But this brass that I bought is very good for about the most lifting I ever need, so I very rarely need more than 0.25 of a mil. So in this case, if I pull you out a bit, if I were to undo these neck bolts, they're very loose. I've got a feeling these might be in need of a better, now I've just slipped that in there for a moment. What I can do is, whilst holding this apart, I can just push it in out of sight for now. If I don't like it, I can remove it again. So now I'm looking at where this aligns to. I need a bit of movement along this way to there. So funnily enough, even that doesn't quite. Problem with the shim on this side of the business, with a neck like this, you've only got a couple of tiny places to make a shim take effect, because a sideways shim has to pivot or swing the neck around if you like, a center of the joint. And in this case, it can't really do it because you've only got this much either side to choose. So if you want to kick the whole thing this way, you can't just push it that way. You need to keep the bottom end where it is and push the neck that way, or keep the top end, bottom end where it is and move it the other way. Anyway, the point is that if you put a piece in there, it'll often just push the whole lot to one side. So I'm going to try something else. Right, let's leave it right out there for a minute. So that still isn't enough to push it sideways. Let's see if I were to double this. In some ways, I'd rather it folded, but folding is not very good because it makes a massive thick bit in the middle. People. Okay, see, even that isn't doing what I really want it to do. Let's try it, do it up for a minute. Let's have a quick look. No, that happens to be even worse, so it needs quite a lot more. So I think the problem with this is we're going to need slightly bigger screws. So let me let me remove one and compare it. Compare. And then let me remove the slightly ineffectual shims. Come on, out you come. Thank you. Oh, look at that, it's broken off now. Good. So, yeah, not terribly handy. So the problem we've got is we need to hold this in a better position. And the question is do the natural holes in this heel permit that to happen? It's quite some realignment. I have to say, I think the only real way we're going to get round this is going to fill those original holes, which means we can still use these screws or new ones, but I think we need to position it where we want it before drilling, but that's going to be quite difficult without strings on. Put that in, bring it down. Okay. So it's gone on a bit of a journey, so I'm just going to slack the strings off for a minute. The problem is if the holes are slightly out of position, then at its full tighten, there's so much movement in this pocket. Look at this; it's awful. I mean, that's just terrible. We've got to get rid of that. So I think the only serious proper answer is we're going to have to create a new and proper positioning, which starts out with the right alignment. And also has a better grip. Now I suppose we could either fill and re-drill these holes, or which gives us a much better chance. This has already got a piece of shim in here as well. So this is me. Flip it over. Yeah. So what we want is these holes to be exactly where we want them, which isn't currently where they are. And I'm trying to think. So this would be quite a fun undertaking. Let us see first of all if I can do something, hold this all on there just for a second, just stay in place. So we can drill, fill and re-drill. I mean, that's almost too big. So this for me is pretty important, because the playability of the neck is paramount. It's the most important thing, and if it's off to one side or if it's waggling in use, then it's a horrible state of affairs. Okay, so this is 3 mils. This is almost a bit too thin. We don't really have a lot of choice. So the only realistic option here is to put this in with a bit of resin, which is fine. So I will cut my 4 little bits, and the resin will just make it a little bit, pack it out a little bit. So what I'm planning to do then is to fill these, and we'll start again. We'll get the neck exactly in place first before making the first pilot holes, and so that the neck will start out. There's too much movement in the pocket, and you can't really do anything about that now. That's why I like to make neck pockets, custom make them for guitars that I'm making, because I can control it and make sure they're pretty snug to begin with. Factory produced guitars like this start out sometimes with really unhelpful tolerances, like this. That it doesn't leave you the opportunity to. You don't have really the opportunity to tighten it up, because you're always playing against the. You're working on force, sheer brute force to make it work. Okay, now this thing, does it actually work? It will maybe come off. Yay. Okay. Is this both pieces coming out at once? Must be. For some reason this is, but it's not coming through. I bet this is a waste of time. Oh, right, this now will be the wrong mixture because it wasn't coming out equally right. That's the wrong mixture. This is the wrong mixture. This will be the right mixture. 50 and 50, thank you. That has put that in one night each side. It's not actually very good. Oh well. Sticky things out the way. Okay. This will take approximately 5 minutes to set when mixed. Normally I would use wood glue when it's a better fit, but this is a fraction too loose. Glooping some of that into there. Anyway, yeah, so I ended up having a think about, yeah, well, the guy's right, you know, boring talk. And then, you know, got me thinking about how difficult it would be to be either scripted or even interesting, you know, several times in a row, day after day. It's just not feasible. It just doesn't work like that. So I'm just covering these in some resin and tapping them in as overspill resin, but that's okay, we can take that off when it's set. Now the thing about this is that I'm pretty sure that the stay on there a minute. Pretty sure that the holes will be almost in the same place, but we don't want them to be exactly in the same place. We want to have that ability to make them just slightly different. So here I'm just cutting them back. What I really want to do is put that on a less of an angle, like that. Clean off, clean off, clean off. Now since this is a poly finish, if I really needed to, I could resort to using cellulose thinners to get that last bit of resin off, but it's fine. So those are filled, and if I leave them to dry for a bit, what I'll do is I'll go and make a cup of tea. I'll go off camera for a minute while this dries, and then I'll scrape them back, we'll put them in, get the position lined up right on one of them, and we'll go from there. and then make sure that all of them, they pull it much closer together. These are probably okay screws, but we'll have a look and see if we've got some others that will do the job as well instead of, except I've got too many in the box and they're getting stuck. It's always the way with little storage containers. Throw things on the floor. See, here's 4 nice dark black ones, fresh. Some plastic stuff. So here's the originals, 1, 2, 3 and 4 somewhere, and there are some new ones which are fresh and absolutely fine. Yeah, I'll give it a nice new, also give it there's more grip. So that one goes over there. These are the 4 new ones, and we'll make our pilot holes adjusted to suit. Alright, let's give it off for a few minutes. I'm going to make me a cup of tea. Okay, so I went off a camera here, basically because it was a bit of a kerfuffle job. It's one of those I wanted to do with a bit of space and headspace. And so what I've done is I've replaced I've re-drilled the holes, I've put a little shim in the back, I've repositioned the neck, fitted new screws, drilled new holes, fitted new screws, so now it's much stronger and it's locked in position where it should be with the little brass shim in the background, so that's fine. I've also, while I'm at it, I've also done the nut, which was actually quite a slightly too low nut shelf. So what I've done is I've boosted this with a thin slab of tusk that I already had left over from something else, and I've boosted it. So, and then I've carefully worked it from the bottom upwards to give the perfect height. So we have the new nut in place. I've also put in blackened marker penned all the frets ready for leveling. So now I'm at the stage where I'm going to check the neck relief, which is just about right, and I'm going to check the last fret action to set it where I want, and then I'm going to level these frets. I'm kind of it's a bit humid in here right now, so I'm working up a sweat. Okay, so this will come down and in. A bit hard to manipulate this guitar. Okay, that's very low, that's good, and that's a little bit high. So what I've just done is taken this down as low as my target action would be. In fact, that's a little bit too low, but hey. Obviously, it's changed the tuning very slightly, so I shall just tune it up to pitch again before doing the leveling. Okay, so what you can see straight away is that down in this neck of the woods we've got some major chocation on the A string and the D, I think. So let's come back to these pickups in a little while. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I just want them out of the way. We've got to replace the surrounds anyway. Okay, so I know that the A, certainly up around 14th, is dead. Okay, and it shows me that something is not happy there. So we'll attack it with that in mind. So now comes the leveling bar tool. Yes, so apologies for doing a bit off camera. Sometimes it gets like that. I charge up the batteries again and watch something mind-bogglingly, whatever, zony outy on the other phone. So one of my phone that isn't a phone anymore, the Hawaii, I use as the thing that connects to the Wi-Fi across in the little office here. And the rest, the other phone, the Apple, is really used only as a camera here, and it doesn't actually connect to anything, because I didn't, the day that my landlord gave me the code, I didn't have that phone with me. Anyhow, so I'm going to begin with the leveling, and I'm kind of expecting to see some weirdness on this. Certainly around this top end, I think we'll see some hills and dales. Well, first of all, there's a low spot I can see straight away down in fret number 2, but we'll see how it goes. And then there's a definite low spot down at 14, which is where it's choking out. Well, actually, that's really, I want to show you this is a very good example of a diagnostic that this method gives me. So looking from an angle so you can see the metal cutting. So okay, lowish, back up, highish, completely low, okay, 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 low, low, okay, okay, low, okay-ish, low, low, really high comparatively, low, really low, 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 low. Oh, that one's okay at the end. So you can see that I would say there is a low spot there, a low spot there, 2 frets, a low 1 fret, low 2 frets, low 4 frets, possibly 5. So you've got this going on with the neck. Now, some people who've raised points on other videos, some on other places, some people, I think, argue that any kind, they might argue that this is the work of shims that does this. Now, I don't think it's the case, because on every neck I level, in every job that must be done, no, in every neck that I level, there are a similar amount of ups and downs. The people who talk about shimming sort of argue that a shim placed under the back end of the heel is, they think it's liable to cause the heel to deform. Now, that could be the case, but I don't think it is, and it certainly isn't any different from the normal situation. Oops, that's never a good look. Okay, never, it's not that different from the normal situation. So we've definitely got a whole series of hills and valleys, and there's some significantly high frets showing up, particularly this one here. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 17 is really high. But what it's telling me is that 14 is really low. Okay, you wait. Now that's the interesting bit, because that's the bit we've got to free up. So the nice thing about this method, and Adam, it's different from the method I used when I did your other guitars, or certainly 1 or 2 of them. But I may have said this before then, but this method is great because it does the leveling with the strings on, which is brilliant anyway, because it saves fret metal, preserves the maximum amount of fret metal while you do the leveling. Yeah, that's, God, 17 is amazingly high. Yeah, so it preserves a maximum amount of leveling, but metal. But it also, because the strings are on and the neck is under in-playing configuration, it allows you to test play. So you actually stop the whole leveling thing when you've got all the notes and bends. Now, see, I know that's going to sound like that because this is low and 17 is monstrously high. So whether one's high or one's monstrously low creates the effect of a discrepancy between the two. And the low one, or the one before the high one, however you look at it, does that. So I think if you want to play at this height, I think we have to do a tiny bit more to, yeah, we need to do a tiny bit more on that track to that 17th fret. And there's no real way around it. When you have a low fret in your pile of frets, you have to take the high one right down to the lowest of the low. And I can see that that number 17, it almost is, I think that one's had a bit of damage, so I expect that one to be wonky, but this one could have been banged or half pulled out at some point. It's had something happen to it. Anyway, so as I'm doing this, what I'm doing is kind of working out a balance, compromise between absolute levelness, which isn't vitally important to get 1000% level. You only want as level as it needs for the action you've chosen to play. You don't need it empirically level because you don't play with zero action. You play with 1.5 millimeters in my case, right? So you can leave some unevenness underneath that action, which is totally fine. But your target has to be to make the chosen action play. Now, as I'm doing this, I can see that there is some grooving on the lower frets, baby, which are not something that I would tackle just for the sake of it. So I'm watching them as I go, and I'm seeing this leveling is going to reduce a lot of it, but I'm not going to hammer away at these frets just to make sure all of that is removed. Most of it will be tidied up and the remainder will be polished away. That's about as good as we're going to get with this ultra low versus the ultra high fret. Now we could raise this by, and I'm working on barely 1.2 millimeters, so we could go up a tiny bit more, but let's see. Same happening here. This fret before 17 is very low and 17 happens to be very high. So we've got a sort of perfect storm in those two frets. I'm going to give the G a little tiny bit more work because ultimately, with the problem that we've got there, this ultimately will only be solved by either continuing to work away at this 17th fret, which, considering it's so relatively high compared to the others, is not a bad thing to do, even though it's kind of seems crazily out of sequence or out of kilter with all the others. We might as well get that one into working shape, and the other ones around it really aren't getting hardly hit at all. So I'm going to do a bit more again on the B up here. It's the same calibration. So, I mean, in truth, would I like not to have a single fret so high causing this problem? Yes, I would, but in truth, we've got one, and the only way to make this play okay at a low action is to get that one fret down to a place where, relative to the others, it will play well. And if you can see, it is massively out of line with the others. Look at that. That is significantly high compared to the ones around it. So you can see it's a challenge, but the only alternative, if you don't want to take away the material from that fret, the alternative is that you raise the action and never have it low. And we're not here to admit defeat in that sort of way. So I don't think it's a problem taking down one fret, because you could say, well, won't that wear out faster than everything? And the answer is, well, yes, but because of its problem and how it's been put in, it's liable to do that anyway. Nothing we can do to give it back a lease of life. Okay, now I'm just going to calibrate this slight adjustment. There we go. So now we know that we've got a set of notes up here that just don't play at all. Not on the D, it's on the A. So let's take care of the D first. Again, I expect the D channel track, I should call it, the D track, I expect it to tell me kind of the same as I've seen throughout, which is a couple of low ones here and there, and then this big discrepancy between 16 low and 17 high, which effectively causes a double high fret. So I'm sort of, with that in mind, I'm attacking that far end a little bit more vigorously, as you can see. Boop, boop. God, that is a mess, that fret. What happened to this guitar? Yay! Wow. Okay, here's the trouble one. Here comes the A that doesn't want to play. I should expect the same fight. I don't expect it to be any different with that fret causing most of the problems, or the one in front being low. It took me a while to work out over time that it's the low frets really that kind of dictate what happens on your fret leveling. I used to sort of think of the high frets because they were easy to visualize, and you could imagine your leveling beam taking them down. But pretty soon you realize that it's the low frets most of the time that cause you kinds of problems. So when we're looking here, this one's amazing. This is as I say, a combination of low and high next door to each other, which is quite it's a pure chance situation. Doesn't happen very often, but it creates that problem. So that's so high that it's getting in the way of the two frets immediately before it. So we shall continue to work on that spot. The others are okay. Oh, sorry, Mr. Microphone. So when I kind of say work on this, I just mean I'm going to just focus my energy gently on this end, press down, because I've just got to hone that 17th fret into some sort of order that it will play in cahoots with its fellow notes, and that is a lot of leveling. Why it's such a bad fret, your guess is better than mine. At this point, you know, I would be saying hey, we've freed up those notes. You see how we get there, but it costs, and it costs in that fret. So I'm going to do a little bit more here because there's a little bit more to go on that one. Just across to the other side of the gap. I mean, this is a massive massive crowning challenge coming up on that one. I may have to do it by hand because I don't think the crowning tool will do a very good job on it. Okay. Now, with something like that, sometimes you can even look down here and see what's going on and see the ups and downs, and I sort of can really. It's organic, that's the problem. It's wood and it does what it wants. And it does what it wants anyway, and it even more does what it wants when you put it under pressure longitudinally. So everything down this end feels pretty good, so I'm just going to lightly skim everything to get rid of any of the wear. And then I'm going to kind of focus again my attention on this treble end, which is up here. And that beastie is in the way of everything. Wow. That's the thing about working it down. Once it's there and it's too high, some people go, well, I should whack it in, hit it. Problem is that sometimes, well, often when it's glued in or it's in place, if you whack it, it'll just become loose. Well, the risk is it will become loose. Well, this is something else. Wow, wow, wowie. That is one awful fret. So you obviously, Adam, you've had to have played this at some pretty high settings the whole time, because that's the only way you will overcome a problem such as this. How do we solve a problem like this high fret? Just one, really. I'll put a low one in front and a high one after. Why, it's the perfect storm. Almost there, but it's so costly in that one fret. But we ain't got no choice. Let's hit it some more. Teach it who's boss. You are going to conform to our requests. This is like one of those flat Gibson fretless wonder frets. It's quite something. I think that is as good as we're going to get, my friends. But you can see what a beast that thing was. Just one out of all of them. Look at that. That is probably the worst fret I've ever seen. I did press it and it did not appear to be moving, so I didn't want to hit it and smash it up and go through that process of moving it. I'll just press it again, but I really don't think it. No, it's. I think that's pretty glued in place, which means I think I'd rather work with what's there and beat that into submission rather than try and tap it and risk it coming out. But yeah, it's definitely way too tall. But that often happens. Thankfully, it's done its work, so the sacrificial string then gives up the ghost and breaks. Had a busy day today. Got the tuners are loose too. Let's tighten those up. Yeah, busy day today. Had started off by dispatching Rick's black Strat off to him. Then Matthew came around with an effects pedal that he needed fixing and wondered if I could have a look at, which I said to him I'm not a pedal fixer, but he said, well, you might as well be because I don't know anyone else, and so on and so forth. So I had a look, and I could see it was a sort of rotary pot thing broken. So I called on a bit of a pedal expert friend of mine to see if they can find out what that unit is and if I can get a simple replacement, whether it's some completely bespoke something that works that only Electro Harmonics makes, in which case he has no choice but to send it back to either a music shop or the manufacturer of the pedal if they do repairs like that. It's a second-hand pedal, so we don't know. But anyway, but I'm kind of listening out to see whether my friend the expert can tell me, identify one that I can replace. Okay, so to begin with, I'm now recrowning the frets. I'm gonna just sort of something like that. Recrowning the frets, and it's a little, as I said, there's a little bit of wear still showing on some of these, but the sanding process will take care of most of it. So even if there's a bit of a dent somewhere, I'm not going to trade out fret metal just for an aesthetic improvement, which is my way of rationalising it. Unless a customer specifically asks me to and says, I don't mind losing metal to clear up those bumps. That's the most important thing in the world for me. But anyway, So kind of getting myself lined up for this one. I'm getting a special file out, ready to see what I can do with it. So the secret of frets is to, once you've leveled them, is to be able to reshape them as much as possible from having a flat spot where you leveled them to into an arch form, so that it puts the intonation center point of the fret back into the middle of the top, the center top of the fret. If you leave flat spots on there, the intonation point, or the start point of the string length, moves to the front of the fret. Now it's only, you know, at worst a millimeter, at very worst, but it's still enough to throw the intonation out, and people care about getting their intonation right, so it seems crazy to start out with frets where the intonation point is all in the wrong place, because it means you are playing slightly out of tune forever, which is silly. So that's one of the reasons for re-crowning it like this, and this process just rounds off the fret without removing the material from the top, because you don't want to do that, because that will change the relative height, or the height relative to the others, which is kind of pointless because we've just gone to a great length to level them all. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give that massively hit one a quick go with this tool and see if it does anything at all. I kind of half expect it doesn't. It puts a little stripe down the edge of it, and I can sort of lean away a bit and try and grind my way inwards. So as you can imagine, having done all of that leveling, we've got a very flat top on this fret. And I don't think we're really ever going to make too much of an inroads onto that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this file here, which is a manual version, and I'm going to try and run it in, tilt it over or tip it over, and kind of curve this fret over on the top. And again, I'm following the black marker pen so that whatever I do, I don't wipe out all of the marker pen on the top, because I want that to represent the sort of high point of the fret. Whoops. So I don't want to rub it out like I just did, but I'll stop there. It's actually quite difficult to do manually. Well, it's not difficult actually, it's just a lot slower than using the StewMac tool, which is why I bought that thing. Okay, well I've done as much reshaping of that beastie as I can, which actually isn't too bad considering the state it was in. So we have a few more things to do while we're in this position. Looks down, looks at those. We've got some new ones, and we'll probably need some new black pickup ring screws to bring this back to life a bit. So that's the wrong screwdriver. I'm going to begin by removing these. Now it means we've got to take the pickups out of the surround, which is not going to be hard, it's going to fall to pieces, but we have to sort of extricate them and then refit them in the new ones whilst everything's still all hooked up. Ah, yes, we've also got something to do with that. Remember, turn the things around. Now these, interestingly, are facing the back, which is the opposite of how a lot of people have it, but it's not the end of the world. So I will get me a small bit. You will. Just take these out this way. Not that way, this way. Now I've gone ahead merrily to remove these without checking whether the footprint is exactly the same. And the truth is, since these are broken, we don't really have a lot of alternatives, even if it isn't exactly the same. So we are going to use whatever we've got. Now, the only thing that does mean is that if they aren't lined up on the holes, we may have to, which it's going to ask me to do, we may just have to, and we basically going to have to fill and re-drill. And that's a bit of a pain because it also puts us in a guesstimate situation. So let me just think to myself, I'm going to stick these on, put the strings back. No, strings won't go back on because they're broken. I don't want to nail these down, these pickups, until I've ideally got some strings on, because then I can make sure they're aligned. But as long as I put them back in and tape them down, I can leave the drilling to the last bit, but I will have to fill the holes ready beforehand. So it's all manner of thinking ahead required here. So same screws for the pickup, lugs, new rings. Okay, so while that's there, what does that one call itself? HB 101N neck, Duncan designed. I'll get myself some of these, a bit of that, some glue. What time is it? Summer's gone, it's 9:15 and it's practically dark. Well, we have to keep going until it's done, not done. Now the reason I'm doing this bit of gluing filling is because if I try and leave the holes, it seems a lot of hassle because the holes nearly line up. But if I don't get it right, what happens is that the screws will try and go back into the old holes, and you'll end up with a sort of torn hole. A nasty medical problem you don't want to have. So this is what I'll do. No, I won't do that because I want to chop the sharp bits off, like so. Right, throw that away. Start again. Cut the sharp bits off. There's 3 facing me with the right ends. So I'm going to use a tiny bit of the taper of the toothpicky, and I'm going to use it just to kind of go into the hole, and then I tap it in, and then I'll cut it back, and then wipe clean the surface, and that gives me a straightforward repair. Like so, get a piece of tissue. Throw. Of course, wood glue is great because you can just wipe it clean and it will dry in its own good time, and you can work straight on top of this now without worrying. Obviously, the first thing is I won't just put things on top of that because it's going to basically, it's sticking up a bit. Now I appear to have lost my blade. Here it is. So what I want to do is bend the blade and go in at a bend and just trim back this little bit. And the bending is really important because it reduces the amount of blade you're working with and doesn't damage any more finish than it needs to, but it trims back quite flush. It's a bit like hand making yourself one of those flush cutting saws that I use a lot. So there we are, the correct way round, Duncan designed, sitting there, and looking at this, it's pretty central, dead straight. There's not too much movement to worry about in those directions. So I'm going to drill straight on top, get one in position, or do them all together, but put that over here. So we've got short ones and long ones. It kind of makes sense, but I think I'll probably end up using long ones since I'm drilling the holes again, and it's up to me how long the holes are. Okay, so that can go in the rubbish too. Out you come. Oops, bits, shards. So these pickup surrounds are Music Lily, so that's that cheap Chinese affair. But having said that, nothing really wrong with them. I mean, a 0.5 millimeter difference in diameter is nothing to worry about, really. So the next thing I'll have to do once I've repositioned these and got these put back in is to take care of the bridge. I'm going to make an assumption that it can't intonate, but the reason it's better to do it now than later is because later I'll be putting the new strings on and then I'll have to slap them all off in order to take the bridge off and do the inevitable. So I'm going to assume it's inevitable from the start, which is probably a better thing to do. It won't harm it, it won't hurt at all if it isn't. If it doesn't need it, won't be any problem. So I'm going to start assuming that it is necessary. So tomorrow we're going for some nice breakfast in town because it's Claire's birthday today. And we're not party people, so we wouldn't go out and drink on her birthday or mine. It's not how we roll, man. But I'll sort of mosey around town tomorrow in daylight and stop in for a nice coffee and breakfast somewhere. Will be a treat. So this is a process I've done 1 trillion times before. It's amazing how many times you have to rebuild or remake holes because the originals are either worn out and become sort of too big and don't grip, or you put a new component on, like a new scratch plate, and the holes on the new thing bear no resemblance to the position of the holes on the other thing. So you have to reposition by filling the old ones and creating new holes to match the new thing. So there's my leftover glue and bits for the bin. My hands are filthy, so I'm going to need to give them a wash in a minute. Amazing how dirty you get just doing guitar things. I think a lot of it might have been from the shaping the tusk nut, which I did off camera, but it is a fairly messy and involved process. So this is, sometimes you have to come at the stub from both sides. You have to be comfortable handling these blades, bending and using them, and even when you are, it doesn't guarantee that you don't end up slicing your hands sometimes. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because it can tolerate a little bit sticking up. In fact, I can't really, because of the thing there, I can't get to the back ends of these two, and I'm not going to really bother. I'll go over the top of them when the time is right. Round, in you go. Okay, so the same applies here. There's practically no side-to-side movement. I can see where, can I see where the thing is? Hard to tell. Let's aim for getting this one in first. So we'll go for a 1.5mm drill. So we go in with that one first, gone fairly deep with that. I'm going to use a new long one. Obviously, it's longer than it needs to be, but we aren't going to lose sleep over that. Let's line this up there. So I tend to do them two at a time. Have I used the wrong ones? I have, haven't I? There's a mixture of things that right. I'll come back and change that one out. And this is, I'm losing my mind. All right, there are some mixed up pieces in here. I'm one of them. Let's get the right ones. Thank you. Feels nice, feels good. Now we're still nicely in position, so we can do the other two. Dead one, good one. Right, you can come out. Since you are the wrong kind, it's a flat topped one. I want the majority of them to be, or all of them to be round topped ones, please. Nice. Okay, let's feel the movement, man. So we know that we're close to the original hole, so that's going to go like that. I'm going to go with that. Come along. Round topped. Actually, what I don't actually know, I actually don't know whether the batteries are still working on this, because sometimes this just conks out without telling me when it's had enough. I had an amazing, I don't know what the word is, it's sort of, I suppose, nostalgic experience yesterday. Years ago, when I was young, I had a sort of accidental chancer's career in the offshore oil industry. And I'd say chances, but what I really mean is that I, without having any formal qualifications for that sort of malarkey, I just made it my business to pay attention to what was going on, and as a result I sort of put myself in the right place at the right times and got to experience a lot more than I would had I not been interested. Anyhow, so back in the 80s, in the early 80s, mid 80s, early to mid 80s, I ended up working for BP on an oil gas platform project, and from nowhere really. And anyway, so the point of the thing was that I got to go go offshore and do some visiting and work on some kind of big heavy metal tech in the oil world, which was a massively interesting experience for me, because I've always liked machinery stuff, and so I couldn't get enough of it. So I went off and did this did this offshore thing. But of course it was in the days before cameras really, and so I hadn't really got any record of it, and it was just one of those things that happened in the analog era that was sort of mostly just memory, you know, and you only had your own memories to depend on. And occasionally over the years I'd sort of looked for, see if there was any evidence of that project that I was on. And of course it's, you know, it's an oil field that has a name and it's out there in the North Sea, and so it exists, you know, and it's probably near the end of its life now, or if not at the end. But anyhow, the point being is that it's not like it didn't ever happen. It happened, and it's a actual oil field. Anyway, so as it happened, just by chance, yesterday I came across a film on, I did a search for it, and I found this. What am I doing? It's banged up against the front of there. It's both of these I need to go to there. Get it right, Sam. Yeah, anyway, I found a film on a BP archive website, and it had the BP ULA project, which was what I was involved in. And this project, what was amazing is that somebody had, you know, the BP's PR department had obviously gone on board the vessels and filmed the important parts of it that I was around for. And yeah, so I got to watch this film, and it was shot from, a lot of it was shot from a barge that was a crane barge, semi-submersible crane barge that was used to lift up the platform legs. Once they'd been floated out from their fabrication site, they were taken out on a barge and then slid off on location over the wellhead. They were kind of slid off the barge into the sea, and then kind of lifted upright by, this needs to go forward. Let me just get this right. That needs to be closer there. That was good. They were rammed up against there. They're rammed against there. This one isn't so badly out of place, actually. I think we might just get away with that one. So I think I only have to turn the first two round. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. So I think that's good. Anyway, I'll be sorry later on. Anyhow, so I watched this video filmed in bleak early 1980s O Vision, you know, which is a very particular looking film stock, because it wasn't TV video cameras. It was, you know, it was done with right, where the hell is the hole? Thank you. It was done with yeah, proper film stock, I guess. But what was amazing is that I saw the one day that the platform with the jacket, which is the legs, that's what it's called, the jacket was floated out, arrived on site, and I remember the actual day that we all stood on the side of this barge, this greasy, oily, massive barge, floating barge with these two enormous cranes that could lift thousands of tons each. We stood right up in the early morning murk, and away in the distance watched the welders cutting the fastenings on this jacket, as it was, you know, which kept it secured to the barge. And when they sort of cut through all the remaining sea fastenings, the thing then tips off and goes off the edge of the barge and rolls down into the sea, which is an incredible experience to watch because it's such a huge object, relatively speaking. So went into the sea, and then the barge comes up close to it, and they kind of they use a basket and drop a couple of engineers or something onto the floating set of legs, because they're buoyant, and then the guy gets into a little control box which is gimbaled, so when the platform jacket is lying on the sea like this, he gets in a box on the end, and he floods the legs. As it goes down, the box stays upright, so he gets to control the thing the whole way down until it's eventually floating vertically just above the seabed. And then they get a load of divers, and they, over a period of maybe hours, several hours, they maneuver it into exact position over the wellhead, and then kind of pin it down, basically, connect it to the wellhead, and that locks it into its final place. And then the crane barge sort of backs off again for a bit. I can't remember exactly, but it sort of sticks around, and its next job is that I think it comes back in when it's time to do what's called piling, and so the legs of the jacket, platform jacket, it sits on the wellhead, but it has to be piled to the seabed with these metal tubes, pins really, nails, and these are sort of, I don't know, 100-foot long, 30-meter long, hollow, inch-thick steel pipes, tubes, empty tubes, and they get lifted up in the air by the crane vessel, and they get slipped into what's called the pile guides. It's all very macho. Get slipped into the pile guides, and there are a series of pile guides all around the legs of this jacket. So the piles get dropped into the pile guides, and then they lift up this massive hydraulic hammer, which is a hammer inside of a big, oh yes, I was going to move that, hammer inside of a big hydraulic thing, and the hammer, I don't know, is several tons of steel, which gets pulled up inside this sheath and then fired back down under hydraulic force. And this hammer then hits the top of the pile, and that pushes it about an inch at a time into the seabed. It just keeps doing that for 24 hours. I can't remember how long it was, but it seemed like a day. Each pile is a day. Oh, that's the wrong way around. Egypt. Now, what I don't know is which is which now, which is the correct way around. I should be able to tell, shouldn't I? That's longer, that's shorter. That should be the neck, but I don't know which way around that actually works. Neck and bridge. Bugger. I'm going to have to test it. Anyway, so this piling takes place and just goes on and on and on and on all night until the piles are hammered into their guides at the bottom of the jacket on the seabed, and then the platform is safely hammered down. Which way around is that going to be? It's going to be that way, right? Okay. Yes, so that was I kind of lived through that amazing experience offshore, and it was amazing to see it yesterday, because I couldn't stop thinking. I know we've all done this when we finally find a gig online that we never knew anyone either recorded or filmed, and we see the gig and hear it again and realise that this weird feeling that we were in that audience on that day, and my experience was that I was in this this huge barge in the middle of the ocean on that day, doing that thing. Or I was there for 3 weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks. So it's an amazing experience. But to come face to face with it yesterday was, yeah, weird. And I saw faces that were familiar because they had some kind of ceremonial bits of breaking some champagne on the jacket before it went in and stuff. And Lady Ferguson, I can't remember who she was. I know the lady, but I can't remember who she was connected to. Anyway, she broke the champagne thing and did the thing. And I sort of thinking, I know her, but I can't remember how I knew her from somewhere. But, you know, 46 years ago, that was something that I'd only ever remembered. Never had anything visual to remember it. Actually, it's not entirely true. I think I had one photograph someone took of me with a Polaroid camera, which we had on board the thingy, and the camera Polaroid was for damage reporting. And I remember this guy took a picture of me, and somewhere it might still be on a hard disk somewhere, but I kind of vaguely remember being dressed up in a offshore helicopter survival flotation suit, getting ready to get on the helicopter and bug off back to Norway because I'd had enough. And then I had that's about it as pictures. I had a couple of pictures I took with the same camera myself of the sunrise above the Norwegian North Sea, which is where, because I think it was in summerish, and the sun barely set. I was amazed. It wasn't even it was only on a par with Aberdeen or somewhere. It wasn't massively high up in the North Sea, but sun barely set, which was quite an amazing experience. So I remember taking a couple of pictures. I used to take stereo pictures, so I would take one picture and then move the camera 6 inches to the side and take it again. And for a long time I had that pair of pictures of nothing more exciting than just sun coming up over the sea and the edge of a lifeboat sticking into the picture. But anyway, it didn't matter. I knew what it meant. Right, so anyway, that was just a kind of a weird thing, and it got me wondering whether does the internet always bring stuff back to you? You know, even the stuff you think just will never rear its head, does it come back to you? Maybe it does. Anyhow, so look, what have we done? We've done almost everything. We've changed the nut, put a tusk nut in. We have tightened up the strap buttons. We've replaced the broken thingies. You know what I mean. The broken pickup rings. We've leveled the frets and beaten up the world's highest and worst fret ever. I'm now oiling the fingerboard, having cleaned it up with some naphtha. Now I'm oiling it again to give it a bit of luster. And I've fitted a new jack because the old one was faulty and cheap, and the surrounds were splitting anyway. So we've sorted that out. I've replaced every screw so far with new black screws. I've readjusted the bridge. I've rotated that and set it in the right place. Checked that it works, and move the saddles around on the bridge. So that's all ready to go. So now I'm ready to put on the strings, and this is my stringing method. It wasn't mine. It's a method that I use, and it puts what I think is the minimum amount of string on. But I will just first of all load up these strings, because when you have, I know it's not adjustable anyway, so it doesn't matter. I was going to say when you have an adjustable nut, which this isn't, I always do the middle strings first on the nut. It's actually not a bad idea to do that anyway, because in case the nut has any imperfections in it, if it's going to try and rock, it'll do it if you pin down one end first before the others, but it shouldn't have any, and therefore it shouldn't be a problem. But I've got into the habit of doing the middle ones first because I'm more often than not fitting adjustable nuts, and that's what is the best thing to do in that case. Now, oh, and of course the other thing I did, by the way, is that I redid the neck joint and filled the holes and put in new, not only drilled new holes, but put in new screws because the others were just not holding it, and I put a shim in the back of the neck pocket to hold it in the right place while I was drilling the new holes. So quite a lot of improvements. So what I'm going to do first is, continuing my theme of doing the G and the D first, I'm going to do the G and the D first. So I go all the way to the end, all the way through, and I grab the string at the first fret and I pull it back to the second fret and I start winding. And I keep it taut and I direct the held string over the loose string first time round. Then I hoik up the loose string, and then as it comes round I press the held string, the tight string, underneath the loose string, and just keep going until that locks off. And there's my first fret. And that's missed the saddle, but there it is. And then what I'll do is snip off the excess nice and flush, so that's all tidy. And then I'll do the D. Now, having taken the bridge off and done an adjustment, it may well be that I need to reposition it for the correct action. But the fact that I've done the leveling for a particular target action means that I can now just, whatever the nut is doing, I can just go straight, whatever the saddle is doing, I can go straight back to the height I had it at before, and the strings will, the frets will comply perfectly. It's very sensitive, so that if I go a fraction below it, we may start getting chokes, but we go back to the one we chose. Now what I noted, and I didn't do anything about, which I'll do in a minute, is that there were some slightly loose tuners, and I should have really done them before doing the strings, and I'll do the 3 of them with the strings currently off, just to make sure that they are tightened up. These can often just come undone over time. So with these I can get over the top here and tighten them up. Obviously the ones I've already strung I can't, so I'll do those with the adjustable spanner. Quite loose, in fact, quite a lot loose. Wow. That makes me think that's going to either strip or something's going wrong there. No, that's okay. Worries me a little bit. So then I go for the adjustable spanner, which is not perfect, but I'll grab it in a position that I can turn it, like a little bit like that, and a little bit like so, and just get it done. Anyway, yeah, so that was finding a strange, really connecting with a version of me from 36, whatever, 40 years ago. No, hang on now, 86, come on, 96, 06, 16, 36 years ago. I don't know, I was going to say it's where I got my love of the ocean and diesel-y smelling large-scale technology and engineering from. And that isn't true. I had that already, because I'm pretty certain that I was born in Trinidad, because my mother's family worked in the oil refinery in a place called San Fernando in Trinidad, and I think her relatives were Texaco employees. Anyway, so I think I was around big engineering as a baby, and then we did a couple of trips between Trinidad and the UK on tankers, oil tankers. So I think it was a kind of cheap company trip to get back and forwards to the homeland. So I remember the long sea journeys and the smell of diesel and kind of oil and grease and big machines from those days. But, you know, being in the offshore oil industry for a bit kind of helped as well. So in the photograph I can remember of getting ready to get onto this helicopter and get off this rig. I remember wearing this big bright orange survival suit, which was what you did, you had to fly in helicopters. And I remember, the picture shows me smoking a fag. And I had long hair with a ponytail, can you believe it? I mean, it was 1980. 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Anyway, yeah, it was those sort of days, and so, whoops, it's better. So yeah, smoking a fag. So what I would be doing now with this, get on your saddle, is thumb and forefinger stretching the strings, get all the slack out of them before we commence playing. And once that's done, then I will check the intonation and see whether we do or don't have a problem at this end. May just have been set out a little bit. Also, you have to remember that intonation is heavily individual, so it all depends on how I fret the strings, which will be completely different from how someone else does. So it's down to finger pressure. And different strings can require a different intonation. Particularly if they're kind of cheap strings like Harley Benton's or, God forbid, Chinese knockoffs or whatever. One of the key signs of cheap made strings, or counterfeit sometimes strings, is that they will not intonate in the normal expected pattern, because the tiniest variation in the gauge and precision of the gauge of the string results in a string needing completely different playing length to what you'd expect. So good sign to watch out for. So this is all I'll stretch for now. So now get the thingy. Oh God, I've left my blasted thing on again. Let's do that. Forever doing that. Jack socket, jack plug. What is this on? Have I switched it on or I just left it on? What's wrong with me? Right. It's sharp, so let's pull it away. Okay. can. Oh God, I hate this. Pull it off to one side, pull it away, longer it. If this comes round to making me have to go the other way with the string, with the saddle positions, I will go mad. You damn swine, you! Oh, about halfway down. This is not looking good for intonation. Right, so interestingly, compared to where it was before, this is actually way off the beam. So, all in the wrong place. But thankfully, my turning around may just have got me out of trouble by accident. That's really high. Come on, back you go, as far as you can go. You're gonna run out right now, I tell you. You sure are. In which case, this means this one's gonna have to go all the way home. Crying wee, 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 all the way home. Let's see if that works. It's almost there. I think we are just about there, but it's not brilliant, I have to say. Let's drag this one back, and then these two, because I have to. I'm lifting these saddles, sorry, the strings off the saddles here because I don't want to wind these under full tension. I also don't want to go backwards and forwards, slacking them off. Right, so this should be approximately right. Yep. Okay, now that may be, we need to make a small adjustment. We do, because the height is too low, because it has moved. Fraction low. 1.5 too high. Okay, about right. Let's try this again. Considering none of the notes would play there before, that's pretty good. So there we have it. Ta-da! Hopefully it's still running the camera. Just about. That's it. A lot of work done on that in that short space of time. And you can see the intonation totally different from where we started out with. Actually, just about getting to where we needed to go. If anything, these could probably do with being back a fraction more, but they're actually pretty good. Yeah, wow. Everything's good. Oh yes, one tiny little detail. Let us put this little truss rod cover back on. Now, of all the things, I've left the truss adjustment where it is because it's pretty good, and it's good enough to not adjust, but also it's pretty good, and it will be where the customer is used to it. I think it's a very small amount, but brilliant. I'm done. Thank you for watching. Time to go home, get a cup of tea and chill out, and I'll see you on the next one, which will be for Adam, and it will be a white one of these. See you soon.